Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
I turned 65 on a Wednesday. I remember because the calendar on my kitchen wall still had a pin mark on it. Dinner with Julian, 7 p.m. I'd circled it the week before, thinking it would be a simple evening. No fuss. Just me, my son, his wife Talia, and a few old friends sharing stories and maybe a glass of wine or two. I didn't expect balloons or cake. I didn't need a slideshow of memories or someone singing off-key. I just wanted to feel seen. That's it. The restaurant was one of those trendy rooftop places Talia liked. Exposed brick, soft jazz playing, Edison bulbs overhead like little stars strung across the beams. We were seated near the edge, with the skyline behind us. Julian had insisted on that view. Said it was symbolic, whatever that meant. We'd just finished appetizers, roasted fig crostini, something fancy with goat cheese. My old friend Marcus had made a toast about how I was still sharper than a tack, and how 65 was just a number. People laughed. I nodded, smiled, raised my glass, and took a sip of wine. It should have ended there, but it didn't. That's when Talia stood up, all glowing and dramatic. She clinked her glass with the back of a fork and said, "Everyone, if I could have your attention just for a moment." I looked at her, confused. She was holding a small gift bag, black and gold with white tissue paper poking out the top like a paper crown. She handed it to me with both hands, the way someone might hand over a sacred object. I gave her a polite smile and reached in. My fingers touched something soft, cotton-like. I pulled it out slowly. It was a baby onesie. White, with gold cursive lettering that said, "Room ready at Grandpa's." Everyone gasped. Someone shouted, "No way." And then, as if on cue, Julian stood up and wrapped his arm around Talia's shoulder like they were posing for a magazine cover. "We're expecting," he said, grinning ear to ear. "And we're so grateful to my dad for offering us his apartment." Clapping. Smiles. Even the waiter paused with a tray in his hand to nod approvingly. A few people at nearby tables looked over and joined in the applause. I was still holding the onesie. I didn't say anything. Julian kept going. "We know it's a big change, but it just makes sense. Talia and I need space for the baby, and Dad's always said he doesn't need much. Right, Pops?" He gave me a wink like we'd rehearsed this. We hadn't. That was the first I was hearing of it. I forced a smile. I think my cheeks twitched a bit, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "Right," I said quietly, not trusting my own voice. They carried on like the decision had already been made. "He'll be moving to a smaller place soon," Talia said, sipping her drink like she was discussing a new kitchen appliance. "Something cozier, more manageable. We'll help with the transition." "Transition?" I nodded. That's all I could do. Nod and smile and pretend I wasn't being handed my own keys as a birthday gift to someone else. I looked around the table. No one questioned it. Not one person asked if I had agreed to any of this. In fact, most people looked at me with admiration, like I had just done something noble. One man across the table clapped me on the back and said, "You're a good man, really. Sacrificing for the next generation." Sacrifice? Funny word for being blindsided. Dinner went on like nothing had happened. Plates of steak, salmon, and some risotto dish came and went. People were laughing, talking about strollers and baby names. No one noticed that I barely touched my food. I was quiet, but not sulking, just quiet in that way a man gets when he's recalculating his entire understanding of the people he raised. After dessert, some hazelnut cake I didn't taste, I excused myself. I told them I was tired. Talia kissed my cheek. Julian hugged me too tightly and whispered, "Thanks again, Dad. You don't know what this means to us." No, I didn't. Not yet. But I would. The walk back to my apartment felt longer than usual. The night air was crisp, and my knees ached a little more than they used to. The streets were quiet. But inside my head? Chaos. I sat on the edge of my bed when I got home, still holding that onesie. It was folded now, placed gently on the nightstand like a piece of evidence in a trial. I stared at it for a long time, trying to remember when exactly I agreed to give up the home I built with my late wife. Ava and I bought this place in 1989. We'd raised Julian there, painted the walls ourselves. She died in the very same bedroom. Every corner had her touch. And now, apparently, it was going to be transitioned. The worst part? I couldn't even be angry yet. I was too stunned, too slow to process it all. But something inside me had shifted. That smile I wore at dinner? It stayed on my face, even now. But it wasn't the same kind of smile. It was tighter, smaller. A kind of smile that held something behind it, something waiting. I went into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window. City lights flickered like false promises in the distance. And that's when it hit me. They didn't ask. They announced. They didn't discuss. They decided. And they used the moment I should have felt celebrated to take something from me with a smile. I didn't sleep much that night, but I didn't cry either. I wasn't sad. I was aware. Something in my son had changed. Maybe it had been changing for years. Maybe I'd missed it, chalked it up to him growing into his own life, his own world. But now, it was in front of me, clear as day. He saw me as a placeholder. A step in his ladder. An old man in the way of his next chapter. And that's when I made a silent decision, right there at the window with the city blinking back at me. They thought I was done writing my story. But I had just picked up the pen. I didn't leave the apartment the next morning. I didn't even open the blinds. The sunlight peeked through anyway, slipping between the curtain edges, making little squares on the hardwood floor like it always had. Ava used to love that light. She'd sit in her robe with a cup of tea and let the warmth hit her knees. "This is where peace lives," she once told me. I didn't feel peace now. I felt something colder, quieter. Not anger yet, but something close to it. Something growing. I sat at the dining table, the one I'd polished just last week, and stared at a box of old documents I hadn't touched in years. My hands moved without thinking, sifting through envelopes, letters, health records. Somewhere near the bottom was what I was looking for, the packet Julian had brought me when I was in the hospital. Pneumonia. 2 years ago. I was out of it. Barely breathing on my own, wired to machines, drifting in and out while nurses whispered about oxygen saturation. Ava had been gone for 3 years by then, and Julian had shown up with concern and coffee. "Just sign a few things, Dad," he'd said, "to help manage the insurance and hospital bills. Nothing crazy." I trusted him. I signed. And there it was, right in front of me. Highlighted, notarized, witnessed, power of attorney. Durable, with no expiration date. My signature was there, shaky from fever, but clear enough. A tiny arrow sticker still clung to the line, like a memory marker. He hadn't taken that out. I sat back in the chair and rubbed my temples. I felt sick again, not in my lungs this time, but in my gut. All this time, I thought I still held the reins. But Julian, he'd quietly wrapped the leash around my neck the moment I couldn't lift a pen without his help. My next move was calling Leah. Leah Baines, my lawyer for nearly 15 years. Sharp, calm, and loyal to a fault. She picked up on the second ring. "George," she said, "I had a feeling I'd hear from you." I explained what had happened the night before. I described the gift bag, the onesie, the public declaration of my apartment being a gift. I told her about the power of attorney and asked her the question I was afraid to hear the answer to. Could he take the apartment? Her silence was longer than I liked. Then she sighed. "Technically, if he believes you're unfit, and if he presents it to a court with medical backup, yes, he could act on your behalf." My heart sank. But she added, her voice firm, "He hasn't filed for guardianship yet. The document alone doesn't give him free rein, unless you're incapacitated." "Are you?" "Not even close." "Then we act now," she said. "We revoke the power. You come in tomorrow. I'll draft the paperwork." I thanked her, but before I could hang up, she said something that froze me. "George, I've seen this before. Not often, but when money or property is involved, family lines blur. Document everything. And be careful. If they're bold enough to announce your move at a birthday dinner, they're bold enough to try anything." After we ended the call, I walked slowly to the kitchen, opened a new folder, labeled it in black ink, evidence. Inside went a copy of the power of attorney, the birthday card from Julian with "Thanks for everything," Dad scribbled like a thank you note for a used couch, and a printout of the Instagram post Talia had made that morning. I stared at that post longer than I should have. Grateful to be building our next chapter in the heart of the city, Grandpa's place will make the perfect nursery. She had tagged an interior decorator. There were mood boards, paint samples, even a mock-up of my living room with a white crib placed where Ava's armchair used to be. That chair still smelled faintly of her jasmine perfume. I felt something crack quietly inside me. Not a break. A shift. The game wasn't emotional anymore. It was legal. It was strategic. Later that afternoon, I walked through the apartment. I traced my fingers along the photo frames, the edge of the mantel, the windowsill where Ava kept her lavender plant. Everything here had roots. It wasn't just a home. It was history. And they wanted it like it was a hand-me-down jacket, something old to be stripped, painted, and flipped for profit. That night, I pulled out old videotapes. One of them was Julian's 5th birthday. Ava made that ridiculous castle cake he loved. She held his tiny hands while he opened presents. In the video, he looked up at me and said, "This is the best house in the world, Daddy." I believed him. I watched that clip 3 times before I shut it off. I wasn't trying to hurt myself. I just needed to remember where we came from. Because if I was going to take steps forward, I had to start from something real, not the story they were now spinning. I didn't sleep much that night either, but this time, it wasn't from confusion. It was clarity. The pieces were falling into place. That dinner wasn't just a manipulation, it was a public performance. A way to back me into a corner where saying no would make me look cruel, selfish, even unstable. The perfect fool, as Ava used to say, was the one who smiled through his own erasure. But I wasn't a fool, and I wasn't erasing myself. I spent the next morning gathering bank statements. I made a list of everything in the apartment that meant something: photographs, heirlooms, a clock from Ava's mother that ticked slightly offbeat. Then I checked my will. Read through it twice. Julian's name was still in there. That would change soon enough. When the doorbell rang around noon, I flinched. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was the building's maintenance man, Ellis. He handed me a letter. No envelope. Just a folded paper with my name scrawled across the top. Inside was a typed document labeled Residential Transition Agreement. Julian's name printed clearly. Talia's signature, bold and theatrical. My line left blank. And a note handwritten at the bottom. "Just sign when you're ready, Dad. Bank deadline's coming up." I stared at it for a long time. Then I walked to the back room, grabbed my scanner, and added it to the evidence folder. Later that evening, I opened my laptop and began searching for real estate agents. Not here in the city, but elsewhere. Somewhere quiet, private, hidden, even. Because if they wanted to play this game behind my back, I'd respond without raising my voice. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't beg. I'd prepare. And when the time came, they wouldn't even see it coming. The first thing I noticed the next morning was the smell of lavender, faint, almost imaginary. Ava used to tuck sprigs of it in the kitchen drawer. I hadn't smelled it in years, but that morning, it came back to me like a whisper. I stood there for a moment, eyes closed, letting it settle around me like a reminder. Stay calm. Stay steady. Stay smart. Then I opened my phone. That's when I saw it. Talia's Instagram post had gone viral, not in the celebrity sense, but enough to draw in hundreds of likes and a swarm of congratulations from her friends, coworkers, and even some of my acquaintances. She'd posted a picture of the living room, the same one Ava and I once decorated together with hand-me-downs and thrift store treasures. Now it looked different, brighter, sharper. She'd added filters, used soft lighting, and tagged it with a caption that made my jaw tighten. Nursery vibes. Blessed to be given this space by Grandpa G. So ready to raise our little one in a place built with love. Below that, a comment from Julian. Nothing but gratitude for our future home. Dad, you're a legend. Legend. They were speaking about me in the past tense. I set the phone down and walked to the window. The city was alive, pulsing with its usual chaos, cars honking, sirens in the distance, laughter from the corner coffee shop. But inside my chest, there was a new quiet. Not peace. Not yet. But the noise of shock had settled, and what remained was focus. I wasn't panicking anymore. I was calculating. That afternoon, a manila envelope was slid under my door. I knew it wasn't from the post office. The handwriting on the front said it all. Julian's neat, almost too perfect print. Inside was a packet labeled Transition Agreement, Draft 2. This one was more polished than the letter Ellis had delivered. There was a timeline laid out, bullet points detailing my planned departure and their scheduled renovations. Talia's signature was scrawled in glittery purple ink. Julian had even included a checklist to help ease the process, he claimed in a sticky note taped to the front. The checklist made me laugh. Not out loud, but in that hollow, stunned way someone laughs when they realize how far a situation has gone. Pack bedroom by April 15th. Notify utilities by April 18th. Final walkthrough with Julian and Talia, April 20th. Keys transferred, April 22nd. He had my life organized like a moving company invoice. There was still no signature from me. Just an empty line. Blank. Silent. Like I was expected to obey quietly. But instead of ripping it up or yelling, I placed the packet on the dining table and took a photo of it. Another one for the folder, evidence. That night, I opened my laptop and clicked into Talia's Instagram again, this time scrolling through older posts. A pattern began to emerge. A photo of a wallpaper sample here. A swatch of nursery blue there. One post was a short reel of her sipping coffee on my balcony, captioned, "Manifesting mornings in our future home." They had been planning this for months. Julian's comment on that reel? "Almost there, babe. Just a few papers left to sign. Just a few papers." Suddenly, something clicked. I rushed to my bedroom, opened my closet, and pulled out a small fireproof lockbox. It was the one Ava insisted we buy after a neighbor's apartment caught fire years ago. Inside were old documents, including the deed to the apartment and a thick, yellowed folder of paperwork from the bank we'd worked with during our mortgage days. Talia's name wasn't on anything. Julian's name wasn't on anything either, yet. But tucked at the back was a form I didn't recognize. A rough draft, and signed, of a property transfer application. The contact listed at the bottom? A real estate office 3 blocks away. I circled it and picked up the phone. I called the number and asked to speak with whoever was handling the West 83rd apartment file. A chipper voice answered. "Hi, this is Becky with Hillstone Real Estate. Are you calling about the unit for staging?" My stomach turned. "No," I said. "I'm the owner of that unit." A pause. "Oh, I was told the owner had already agreed to the process." "Who told you that?" Another pause. A cough. "A woman named Talia Marks. Said she was working with her father-in-law to transition the unit into a family property." Family property. That phrase rang in my ears like a warning bell. "Is there a contract?" I asked. "Not signed," she admitted. "We were waiting on the final go-ahead, but we've been compiling ideas for the redesign. Would you like to see them?" I agreed. She emailed them while we were still on the call. And a minute later, my inbox pinged. There they were, mock-ups, Pinterest boards, a PDF titled Mark's Residence Vision Book. Page 1 had my living room turned into a gender-neutral baby haven. Page 2 was a mood board for a home office space for the hardworking mom. There was even a proposal for removing the built-in bookshelves Ava and I had refinished by hand. It was like watching someone gut a memory. I stared at the screen for a long while. Then I clicked Save As and filed the document into the growing folder on my desktop. Next to screenshots of texts, photos of handwritten notes, and a copy of the transition agreement. I wasn't just keeping evidence anymore. I was building a case. A knock came at the door later that evening. This time, I didn't flinch. It was Julian. He had that same smile he wore at the birthday dinner. The practiced one. Polished, polite. Behind his back, he held a bottle of wine. "Thought we could talk like men," he said. I didn't step aside. I just raised an eyebrow. "We already talked," you announced. To everyone. He laughed. "Come on, Dad." It was a surprise. We were excited. Didn't mean to blindside you. Yet you did. He shifted awkwardly. Talia's just under a lot of pressure. She's really trying to make this place feel like home for the baby. It would mean the world if you just signed and let this process be smooth. I leaned against the doorframe. Calm. Quiet. Still. "Julian, let me ask you something," I said. "When you were 5, and I took you to the baseball field every Sunday, did you ever think that one day you'd treat me like a placeholder?" He blinked. "I raised you here. Loved you here. Buried my wife here. And you too. You're gutting it like it's a clearance item at a yard sale." His face hardened. "You're being dramatic." "No," I replied. "I'm being deliberate." And then I closed the door, slowly, silently, letting the latch click like a signature. The next morning, I printed out everything I had gathered so far, stapled it into a thick packet. Then I made a call to an old friend, a realtor named Samira, who lived a few hours north. It was time to disappear before they ever knew I was leaving. It was 2 days after Julian's doorstep visit when Talia showed up, alone, and smiling like nothing was wrong. I'd just made a pot of tea and was slicing into a loaf of banana bread I'd baked the night before. It was one of the few things Ava had taught me how to make, and I always found the smell oddly comforting. It reminded me that even in chaos, you could still create something warm. I wasn't expecting company, but there she was at the door, sundress, oversized sunglasses, and a bright pink tumbler in hand. "Hi, Dad," she said, using that sing-song tone that always rubbed me the wrong way. "Mind if I come in?" I could have said no. I probably should have. But curiosity got the better of me, and I stepped aside. She waltzed. Just plopped down on the couch and looked around like a home inspector evaluating what she'd soon inherit. "You redecorated," she said, nodding toward the new throw blanket on the armchair. Nice. But we'll probably keep things more minimal. For the baby, you know. I sat across from her and folded my hands, watching her like a man observing a play he'd already read the script for. She pulled a bottle of prenatal vitamins from her purse and set it dramatically on the coffee table. Then took a long sip from her drink, something fizzy and bright red. Not exactly what a pregnant woman should be drinking, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. You look good, she said. Really healthy. Julian and I were just saying how glad we are you're doing better. Appreciate that, I said calmly. Didn't realize I was ever doing badly. She waved her hand. You know what I mean. Getting older, recovering from that hospital stay, must be exhausting. I leaned forward slightly. Not as exhausting as having someone take my apartment without asking. She giggled, actually giggled. You're so dramatic. We're not taking it, Dad. We're repurposing it. Breathing life into it. It's still family. Repurposing. She opened her purse and started rifling through papers. I caught a glimpse of a thick folder labeled Future Plans and saw sketches, layout maps, paint samples. But what caught my eye, what made my jaw clench, was the word listing package. I saw the logo of a real estate staging agency printed in the corner. Talia didn't notice me looking. Would you like some tea? I asked, standing before she could answer. In the kitchen, I pulled my phone from my back pocket, opened the camera quietly, and took a photo of her open folder on the couch. She didn't notice when I returned. Too busy swiping through pictures on her iPad, which she laid flat on the table. I glanced down and saw mock-ups, digital renderings of my living room with different furniture. Ava's rocking chair was gone. My bookshelf replaced by pastel cubbies and plastic bins. Planning a nursery? I asked. She nodded eagerly. Yes. I mean, we haven't finalized the layout, but it's going to be magical. I've already posted some of the early designs. People are obsessed. I sipped my tea and watched her. And the baby? How far along are you now? There was a flicker, just a brief one. A split second of hesitation before she straightened and smiled wider. Just early days. You know how it is. Gotta stay careful. She picked up her bag again, and that's when I noticed something else, a packet of Zillow printouts. Listings. Apartments in the neighborhood. I saw red circles drawn in ink, one of them with "after sale" written beside it. They weren't moving into my apartment. They were planning to sell it. That's when the truth sank all the way in. There was no baby. No genuine plan to make this place their home. It was all a front, a manipulative, well-staged performance. I was being played by people who'd rehearsed their lines perfectly, down to the tears, the toasts, and now the vitamins. I stood up slowly. Talia, I'd appreciate it if you didn't visit without calling next time. She blinked, caught off guard. Oh, of course, I just thought. I know what you thought, I said quietly. You thought I wouldn't notice the soda, the lifting, the way you carry that heavy bag without a second breath. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open. You're not pregnant, I said calmly. She let out a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Excuse me. I said you're not pregnant. And if you are, you're not behaving like someone protecting a child. You're behaving like someone staging a con. Her face flushed. The smile vanished. How dare you accuse me of? I didn't accuse. I observed, I replied. And I documented. She stood, her hands trembling slightly as she grabbed her purse. Julian will hear about this. I'm counting on it. She left in a storm of perfume and indignation, slamming the door behind her like she was the wronged one. I didn't chase her. I didn't apologize. I just stood there for a long while, staring at the folder she had left behind. She'd been too flustered to take it with her. I opened it slowly. Inside were floor plans, real estate agency letters, a mock real estate listing drafted with my address, and at the very back, a printed email chain between her and a contractor titled, Prepare to stage, May 1st start date confirmed. I scanned the whole thing and saved it in my evidence folder. They were planning to gut the apartment by May, remove my furniture, tear out the kitchen backsplash Ava had chosen herself, sell the unit, or flip it and rent it out for profit. And they expected me to step aside, like I was just a relic in their inheritance museum. But I wasn't a relic. I was the owner. That night, I called Samira again, told her what had happened. She didn't hesitate. George, it's time, she said. Do it quietly. No listing, no alerts. I know a buyer. Older woman, widowed, wants a place close to her grandchildren but doesn't want to be haggled. She'll pay cash. No inspection nonsense. I smiled. That's exactly what I need. We went over the details, and by the time I ended the call, I knew two things for sure. One, they had overplayed their hand. And two, I wasn't waiting to be evicted from my own life. I was leaving on my terms. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of relief. You'd think that after the week I'd had, the birthday ambush, the power of attorney realization, and now Talia's fake pregnancy, I'd be exhausted. But no, I felt awake. Like my brain had finally kicked into gear after months of being lulled by false peace. The fog had lifted. Now came the part one was good at: planning, strategizing, executing. I made my coffee slow that morning. No distractions. No phone calls. Just the whir of the kettle and the hum of traffic outside. Then I opened my laptop and called Samira again. It was time to make things official. She answered with a cheerful, "Morning, General." I laughed. "Why do you call me that?" "Because you're treating this like a quiet war, and you're winning it like a tactician. Let's talk logistics." She walked me through the timeline. The buyer she had lined up, Mrs. Eileen Morris, was a retired teacher whose daughter lived 2 blocks away from my building. She had no interest in open houses or buzz, just wanted a clean deal. And she was ready to pay in full, no mortgage needed. Perfect. No listings. No sign out front. No posts. Quiet transfer. I repeated. "Exactly," Samira said. "I'll bring the papers for signature next Thursday. But we can start the process today. I'll loop in the attorney for the trust documents too." Trust. That word echoed in my mind longer than it should have. It wasn't just about the apartment anymore. It was about who I was giving control to from here on out. Who I was keeping close. Who I was locking out for good. I began packing that same afternoon. Not in boxes, though. Not yet. Just the essentials. Ava's wedding ring, which I kept hidden in a drawer. A few photo albums. Her cookbooks. One leather-bound journal she wrote in before her last hospital stay, filled with half-finished poems and notes she never shared with anyone but me. I placed everything in a carry-on suitcase and zipped it carefully. Then I opened my messages and sent Julian a text. "Any tips for baked salmon? Thought I'd try your mother's old recipe." It was bait. He'd think I was softening. Giving in. He replied within minutes. "Add a little lemon zest to the foil before you bake it. Talia does it that way. Glad you're relaxing more." I stared at that message for a long while. Relaxing. He thought I was settling into surrender. Good. I sent a thumbs-up emoji and left it at that. Over the next few days, I played dumb. I answered his texts about stroller brands and baby name polls. I nodded along when he sent mock-ups of nursery paint. Talia even sent swatches in the mail, little pink and yellow squares taped to a card that said, "Can't wait to turn your space into love." Every one of those got dropped straight into the evidence folder. Meanwhile, I began setting things in motion with a speed they wouldn't expect from someone they'd labeled a sentimental old man. I contacted my bank and opened a new account under a private LLC name Samira helped me create, Cabin Clause Holdings. A name they'd never trace back to me unless they had a lot of time and a very good lawyer. Then I began liquidating assets I didn't need. The unused piano. The antique rug Talia once asked me to donate because it clashed with her aesthetic. Sold it for $3,000 to a collector in New Jersey. The apartment was getting lighter. Cleaner. Not just of stuff, but of memories that had been weaponized. On Wednesday, I made the 3-hour drive up north to a quiet little town called Woodmere Falls. I passed lakes and winding roads, watched the concrete dissolve into trees. I didn't even turn the radio on. I just let the silence wrap around me like an old coat I forgot I still had. The cabin was everything Samira promised. A modest 2-bedroom with a porch that faced the lake, birdsong in the background, and the faint smell of pine in the air. There was no doorman, no street noise, just space. Space to breathe, space to start over. I walked through it slowly, touching the banister, the walls, the cool kitchen counters. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, untouched by betrayal, unstained by fake smiles and silent setups. I signed the papers in a local diner that doubled as a real estate office. Samira slid them across the table with a wink. "Congratulations, George. You now on the world's quietest revenge plan." I grinned. Let's hope I never have to say the word nursery again. After the deal was signed, I bought a second-hand pickup truck from a local dealership. Paid in cash. No financing. No trail. Then I drove back home. And that night, I began the true packing. This time with boxes. I packed in silence. Carefully. Methodically. Not just the big stuff, but the meaningful. The family photo where Julian still looked at me like a hero. The The vase Ava bought at that yard sale in Vermont. The snow globe from our first trip after retirement. I left everything else. The furniture they were planning to throw out. The dishes they said they'd donate. The couch they mocked for being too outdated. Let them have the shell. I was taking the soul. By Friday, all the boxes were stacked and labeled. The moving truck had been arranged under a different name, and I scheduled it for early morning before sunrise. I didn't want neighbors seeing. I didn't want word spreading. When I texted Julian again, I asked if he could bring me bubble wrap. He replied with a laughing emoji and said, "Already looking forward to redecorating." Good. Let him think I was cooperating. Let him believe he was winning. The final piece? I transferred the rest of my assets into the new LLC and closed the old joint account that Julian had temporary access to from 2 years back. I'd almost forgotten about that one. Not anymore. I changed the locks. Again. And then I sat in the empty living room with one last cup of tea. Looking around, I thought about the years that passed inside those walls. The arguments. The laughter. The quiet moments with Ava when we'd say nothing but still understand each other. And then I thought about how quickly all of that was dismissed by the people who claimed to love me. Julian and Talia weren't building a future. They were erasing my past to make space for their profit. But I had something they didn't. The right to leave. On my terms. And the will to walk away without ever slamming a door. The morning I left the apartment for good, the city was still asleep. The moving truck arrived at 5:45 a.m., just as I'd arranged. No logos on the side, no loud voices, just a quiet crew of 2 who worked like ghosts. I offered them coffee, but they were all business. "We'll have it all loaded in under 2 hours, one of them said. I just nodded and pointed them toward the boxes. As I stood in the now bare hallway, I ran my hand along the wall where Ava had once pinned our son's kindergarten art. Crayon drawings, stick figures with oversized heads, the words, "My dad is my hero," written in crooked letters. I remembered the tape peeling, the way she'd insisted on keeping them up for years, even after Julian asked her to take them down. "It's where he came from," she'd said. Now, the walls were blank. Just paint and plaster. But my mind could still see every moment. I wasn't sad. Not really. Just ready. I was stepping out of a chapter, not losing it. By 7:30 a.m., the truck pulled away from the curb. I stood on the sidewalk with one small suitcase in hand, the same one that held Ava's ring, the old journal, and the framed photo from our 20th anniversary. That was all I needed. Before I left, I did one last thing. I changed the locks again. Not because I had to, but because it made a point. Julian still didn't know I was leaving. He thought I was just downsizing, his favorite word lately. He assumed I was softening, folding under the pressure. That his charm, or perhaps Talia's sugary smiles, had finally worn me down. But it was never about charm. It was about control. And the moment I stepped into that cab to the train station, I took it back. The ride to Woodmere Falls was calm. No traffic. Just endless stretches of road surrounded by trees slowly blooming into spring. The further I got from the city, the more my shoulders dropped. By the time I reached the cabin, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long while, lightness. As if every lie, every manipulation, every expectation had finally slid off my back. The cabin was waiting. Empty, quiet, and mine. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. There was a folded welcome note from Samira on the counter. Just a simple congratulations. "You made it." I smiled. Then I got to work. The movers arrived a few hours later. I directed them as they brought everything in, careful with the books, the grandfather clock, the old coffee table that still had a scratch from the time Julian crashed his toy truck into it. They placed Ava's favorite reading chair by the window, facing the lake. I'd made sure of that. She would have loved this view. By evening, everything was unpacked. I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees, watching ducks skim across the water. No cars. No elevator dings. No footsteps in the hallway. Just peace. But peace, I learned quickly, doesn't always last. The very next morning, my phone rang. Julian. I didn't answer. I didn't even hesitate. I just let it go to voicemail. Then came a text. "Hey Dad, tried to stop by earlier, but the super said your locks were changed. Everything okay?" A few minutes later, another message. "We need to do the walkthrough. Talia has contractors scheduled for Monday. Let me know when we can come in." I stared at the screen, then powered off the phone completely. I let 2 days pass. During that time, I stocked the fridge, met the hardware store owner who lived across the lake, and registered with the town's medical clinic. I was settling in. And then, 3 days after I'd left the city, They showed up at the apartment. Or tried to. Julian called 12 times. Talia sent a string of increasingly desperate texts. One of them simply read, "We're outside. Open up." Another, "The building manager says you moved." Then came the one that confirmed it all. "Dad, what's going on? The door won't open. There's a woman inside saying she lives there now." That made me laugh. They had tried to take my apartment before I was dead. Now, someone else lived there, and I was very much alive. I waited until the next morning, then turned the phone back on and sent one text to Julian. "You'll need to speak with my attorney going forward." That was it. No explanations. No justifications. I owed them none. An hour later, Julian called again. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, his voice urgent, not angry yet, just off balance. Like someone who had expected a chess piece to be in one spot, only to find the board rearranged. "Dad, I don't know what you're doing, but this isn't okay. You blindsided us. This was supposed to be our future. Talia is in tears. You've put us in a horrible position." I replayed that voicemail twice, not because I felt guilt, but because it was fascinating how quickly people could turn themselves into victims after trying to steal from you. I texted one more thing. "Your future was never mine to fund." That was the last time I reached out. The next step was tightening the walls around my life. Leah, my lawyer, had everything she needed. The sale was closed. The deed had been transferred. I updated my will. Julian and Talia were removed as beneficiaries. In their place, I established a small scholarship fund in Ava's name, set to support older adults returning to college in their 60s. I also created a trust, one that protected every asset I owned, from my savings to my cabin to the last bit of Ava's jewelry. Julian couldn't touch any of it now. Not legally. Not even if he tried to challenge mental fitness, because Leah had already arranged an independent review. Clean bill of health. Lucid. Capable. Willing. I was not fading. I was simply walking away. But the silence didn't last forever. On Saturday, I received a knock at the cabin door. Not a knock. Actually, more like frantic pounding. I opened the curtain a sliver and saw them. Julian. Talia. Standing on my gravel path in their city shoes, looking out of place, like actors who walked into the wrong scene. He had a manila envelope in hand. She was holding her phone, probably already recording. I didn't open the door. Instead, I stepped back, sipped my tea, and waited. Talia raised her voice. "You're turning your back on your grandchild." I almost laughed. The lie was still alive and kicking. Julian added, "This isn't over, Dad. You can't do this to us." But I already had. They waited there for 10 minutes. Maybe 15. Then they turned back to their car. I watched them drive away, kicking up a trail of dust behind them. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams. No restlessness. Just silence. The kind that comes after you've locked a door and thrown away the key. The first thing I noticed the next morning was the way the sun hit the lake. Bright and quiet, with a shimmer that almost made the last week feel like a fever dream. I sat on the porch wrapped in a flannel blanket, tea in one hand, the other resting gently on the armrest Ava once insisted we sand smooth. The cabin had a way of reminding you what mattered, and what didn't. But peace, I learned, had a funny way of being tested. At 9:12 a.m., I got a notification on my phone. Then another, and another. I hadn't even turned on the news or checked my messages yet. These weren't texts from Julian or Talia. No, these were tagged posts. Public comments. Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn, of all places. The first one made me blink twice just to believe what I was reading. Heartbroken for my friend Talia. Her baby deserves better. Abandoned by her FL after he promised his home. Shameful behavior. Hashtag family should mean something. Attached to it was a photo of me. Or more specifically, of my back. Me, standing in front of my apartment building weeks ago, holding grocery bags. The angle was odd, taken from inside a car. I kept scrolling. The next post was worse. You never think the man who hosted Christmas for the block would turn out to be so cruel. Kicking out your own pregnant daughter-in-law? We see you. Hashtag justice for Talia. Hashtag elder doesn't mean innocent. My jaw clenched. Then I found the source, Talia's page. She had posted a video. In it, she was C. The caption read, "He told us we'd raise our child in his home. We believed him. We decorated. We dreamed. And then he locked us out. No warning. No goodbye. Just betrayal. I never thought I'd be publicly begging for kindness from my own family. But here we are. The tears. the shaky breath, the dramatic pause before whispering, "I just don't know what we did to deserve this." She was good. I'll give her that. The comments were flooding in. People I hadn't heard from in years, former neighbors, old coworkers, even Marcus, my friend of 30 years, had liked the video. Some left concerned comments. A few shared it with their own messages about the tragedy of elder control and housing inequality. Julian had commented too, still trying to protect her peace, even when we're both in pain. He attached a screenshot of a document. It was the unsigned deed transfer. My name blank. There's bold and filled in. I couldn't help but smile. Not out of joy, but from the sheer audacity. They had turned me into the villain in their story. The greedy old man. The heartless father. They didn't just want the apartment, they wanted applause for taking it. I didn't post anything in response. I didn't call them. I didn't write a rebuttal. Instead, I sent one sentence. To my lawyer. Talia is publicly defaming me. File the cease and desist. Within 2 hours, Leah had it drafted and emailed. But that wasn't the real move. That was just the warning shot. The real move was the paper trail. I took screenshots of every post, every video, every comment that called me abusive or implied wrongdoing. I stored them all in the folder titled Fraud Attempts that had been growing like a digital tree over the past few weeks. By the time I was done organizing, it held over 70 files, photos of forged signatures, emails about future sales, listings mocked up with my name scrubbed from them. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a campaign. And they were trying to bury me beneath the weight of public opinion. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I pulled out Ava's journal. Not to cry, just to listen. Her handwriting was soft, looping, with words always a little bigger than the lines allowed. One entry struck me. We raise them hoping they'll carry the best parts of us. But sometimes, they only remember what benefits them. Love doesn't always come back in the same shape you gave it. She must have written that after one of Julian's earlier selfish phases. Probably during college, when he ignored us for nearly a year, only to call when he needed tuition for a study abroad program. I closed the journal and stared out the window. I wasn't angry anymore. I was resolved. The next day, I wrote an email. Not to Julian, not to Talia, but to every person who had reached out to me directly because of the video. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't defensive. Just facts. Dear friends. Some of you have recently seen posts online about a decision I made regarding my home. I want to be clear. I did not kick anyone out. I sold my home, legally, quietly, and on my own timeline. There was no agreement, no signed deed, no formal discussion beyond an assumed entitlement that was never earned. I am well, healthy, and living peacefully. While I understand the emotional nature of family, I will not be manipulated, bullied, or pressured into sacrificing my peace for optics. I wish my son and his wife healing, but I have chosen distance for survival, not spite. I didn't post it publicly. I didn't attach photos or counterproof. I didn't try to win, because I wasn't in their contest anymore. Later that evening, my neighbor here in Woodmere, a soft-spoken woman named June, stopped by with a pie. Saw the moving truck the other day, she said. Thought you might like some company. We sat on the porch for an hour talking about everything except family. Books, weather, the strange screech the foxes make at night. She didn't ask where I came from. Didn't need to. Some people understand that silence is a kind of survival. Before she left, she said, "It's peaceful here, but it's not empty. You'll see." I like that. I sat outside long after she left. The night air was crisp, the sky ink black. Stars stretched over the lake like scattered glass. My phone buzzed once more. A text from Julian. "You'll hear from our lawyers soon. Hope the loneliness was worth it." I didn't respond. I just smiled, not out of smugness, but because for the first time in years, the silence wasn't empty. It was mine, and I intended to keep it that way. It was a rainy morning when I got the call from Leah confirming everything had gone through. The cabin, the trust, the amended will, every document had been signed, notarized, and sealed. My assets were secured. My accounts were protected. And Julian and Talia? Legally removed from any claim to anything that bore my name. I stood at the kitchen sink as she read off the last line, and both Julian Marks and Talia Marks are to be excluded as direct or contingent beneficiaries of the estate, including but not limited to all property, holdings, and financial accounts. I said nothing for a moment, letting the words settle in the quiet air of my new home. "You sure about this, George?" Leah asked gently. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. And I meant it. After we hung up, I placed the phone down, poured myself a second cup of coffee, and walked over to the drawer where I kept what I'd now come to call the folder of finality. Inside it were everything they'd sent me in the past 3 weeks. Texts, threats, fake agreements, and perhaps the most laughable of them all, a fake sonogram that arrived by mail 2 days before Leah's call. Wrapped in ribbon. In a gold envelope. No return address. But I knew exactly where it came from. Inside was a neatly folded sonogram photo, the kind that shows a fuzzy blur and a white dot they claim is a baby. Except this one had the name Talia Marks typed in a different font than the standard medical prints. Under it, in even fancier lettering, were the words, "Still your grandchild, whether you acknowledge it or not." There was also a card. "Dear George, we hope this reminds you of the future you're turning your back on. There's still time to fix this. Families make mistakes, but you can choose love. Talia and Julian." I didn't even touch the photo again. I slipped it into a clear plastic sleeve and added it to the growing stack of what Leah labeled manipulation tactics. They were persistent. I'll give them that. But it was too late. I had already moved the trust into Ava's name, well, her memory. The Ava L. Marks Memorial Trust, now publicly registered, would fund a small nonprofit supporting elderly people who had been financially exploited by family. It would provide legal aid, housing assistance, and therapy support, a cause she would have believed in. I wasn't just walking away from Julian and Talia. I was sealing the road behind me. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. Because somewhere, deep down, some flicker of my former self still wished things had gone differently. That maybe, at some point in the last few years, Julian would have looked at me the way he did when he was 5 years old, wide-eyed and proud, clutching my hand on the way to school. But that boy was gone, buried beneath ambition, ego, and entitlement, replaced by a man who thought love came with a deed. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the post office in town, just a 15-minute walk past tall pine trees and a road that curved like a sleepy snake. I carried 2 things with me, a letter and the original apartment key, now dangling from the chain Ava once used on her garden shed. The letter was addressed to Julian. Simple, tight, and free of any warmth. Julian, the apartment no longer belongs to me. It was sold legally. You will find no documents with my signature because I did not authorize any transfer to you or Talia. Any claims to the contrary will be met with legal action. As for the sonogram, I suggest you keep your performances off social media and in your own home. There is no place for either of you in my estate. I wish you the kind of peace that comes from honesty. Dad. I dropped it in the outgoing bin and didn't look back. On my way home, I stopped by the grocery store. Small town, family-owned. Everyone knew everyone. A teenage boy named Eli bagged my groceries and asked, "You settling in okay, Mr. Marks?" "Call me George," I said, smiling. "You should come by the library sometime," he added. "They're doing a chess night. Real quiet crowd, mostly older folks. But they'd like you." I nodded. I just might. It wasn't the kind of thing I'd have done before. But something about this new life, this intentional quiet, was drawing me into spaces I used to overlook. That evening, I cooked dinner for one. Roasted vegetables, rice, and grilled salmon, the same recipe Julian had once texted me about. I thought about how, just weeks ago, I was pretending to fumble through that conversation as part of the distraction. Now, I was cooking it because I actually liked it. Funny how much can change when no one is watching you anymore. After dinner, I sat by the window with a glass of water and the faint sound of frogs echoing from the lake. The cabin was dimly lit, the old lamp flickering gently like it had a heartbeat of its own. And then, without warning, a memory hit me. Ava, sitting on our old apartment couch, holding a photo album and humming. She always hummed when she felt content. Not singing, just a steady, low hum that filled the room with calm. She'd run her fingers over old pictures like they were Braille, reading the past with a kind of tenderness I never quite mastered. If she were here now, I think she'd understand why I had to leave. She'd be furious at Julian, of course. Protective in the quiet, stern way she could be. But she'd understand that survival doesn't always look like fighting. Sometimes, it looks like stepping aside. Like starting again. I rose, pulled open the drawer where I kept the trust papers, and added one more page, a handwritten note in Ava's old stationery, which I'd found tucked inside a forgotten cookbook during the move. "George, if you ever need to disappear for peace, don't apologize. Good people get tired too. Love. Me." It was the last note she ever wrote me. I'd forgotten about it until now. I smiled as I slid it in between the legal pages, like sealing a promise. That night, I slept with the window open. The air was crisp. The trees whispered. And in my dreams, no one was knocking at the door. The knock on the door came just before dusk. Not loud, not aggressive, just persistent. Like someone who knew you were inside but didn't want to scare you, only wear you down. I had just finished sweeping the porch, the broom still in my hand when I heard it. My first thought was June, the neighbor, maybe bringing another pie or asking about the library chess night. But something in the air felt different, heavier. I moved slowly to the door, heart steady, grip tightening on the broom handle, just in case. I didn't open it. I looked through the side curtain first. There they were, Julian and Talia, standing on my gravel drive like two strangers at the wrong house. Talia wore white, an intentional choice, no doubt, something flowy and soft, with her hair tied back loosely like she was playing the role of a weary but gracious guest. Julian had on that blue shirt I'd bought him years ago for a job interview. He hadn't worn it since. I suppose today was his version of diplomacy. They brought wine. Of course they did. A bottle wrapped in a brown paper bag, clutched in Julian's hand like a peace offering. As if good intentions could be disguised in Cabernet. I didn't move. I just watched them from behind the curtain, hidden in the quiet glow of the setting sun, listening to the frogs chirp and the wind rustle the trees behind them. Talia stepped closer to the door. I could hear her voice faintly through the wood. George, we just want to talk. Talk. That word again. That old tool abusers use when their schemes fail, when they realize the door they kicked open might not let them back through. Julian added his voice next. Dad, please. Just a few minutes. I leaned my forehead gently against the door. Not because I was unsure, but because I needed to feel the boundary I had built. This door, this line between past and peace, was no longer a metaphor. It was wood and steel and silence. A silence I had earned. We brought something, Talia said, her voice cracking in that practiced way she had perfected. It's a letter. From us. Just, please. I didn't answer. I didn't unlock anything. I let them stand there. Talia's voice grew firmer. You're turning your back on your grandchild. I almost laughed. There it was again, that imaginary child, that golden ticket she waved when all else failed. The lie they thought would tether me to them forever. A non-existent baby, weaponized like a pawn in a family chess match they had already lost. I backed away from the door and sat in my armchair by the window, just out of view, sipping my tea while I watched them through the sheer curtains. Julian paced. Talia sat on the porch steps, her hand over her mouth, as if waiting for emotion to find her face. It never quite did. Her tears had dried up weeks ago, replaced with strategy and a PR campaign that failed to ignite the sympathy she expected. After 10 minutes, Julian pulled out his phone. I saw his thumbs moving fast, probably a text, or maybe a post. Maybe a final please sent to my number with some version of, we can still fix this. But I didn't check. I wasn't giving them the satisfaction of my reaction. Finally, Julian stood, said something sharp to Talia, her shoulders stiffened, and they walked back toward the car, still parked in the gravel like it belonged there. Before he opened the door, Julian turned and shouted toward the cabin. You win, Dad. Hope the loneliness was worth it. Then they drove off, tires crunching over gravel, red taillights blinking once before disappearing into the trees. And just like that, the air was still again. I waited 10 minutes before standing. Then I opened the door, not to step outside, just to check what they'd left. A small envelope sat on the welcome mat. No name. No return address. Just please read scrawled across the front in rushed handwriting. I picked it up and held it like it was made of glass. Then, slowly, I walked back inside and set it on the coffee table. I didn't open it that night. I didn't need to. I knew what it would say. Apologies wrapped in conditions. Sentences that started with, we never meant to hurt you, and ended with, but we needed a fresh start. What they really meant was, we're sorry we lost. I went to bed early, the envelope still unopened. That night, I dreamt of Ava again, not as she was in the hospital, but young, vibrant, standing on a picnic blanket by the lake, laughing as she tossed grapes into the air and tried to catch them in her mouth. I stood beside her, and she turned to me and said, you built peace. Don't invite noise. I woke up at 6:02 a.m. to birdsong and sun flooding the room like it had been waiting for me. I made coffee, sat on the porch, read the local paper, and when I went back inside, I picked up the envelope again. I looked at it for a long moment, then opened the fireplace grate, struck a match, and fed the letter to the flames. Not out of anger. Out of closure. Some things don't need to be read. They just need to be burned. I stepped back, watching the paper curl and blacken, turn to ash and drift upward like ghosts leaving my life for good. That afternoon, I went into town and signed up at the community center. They were looking for volunteers to help organize the upcoming fall festival. I added my name to the chessboard sign-up too. June had mentioned it. I figured I'd give it a try. People smiled when I entered the room. Not because of my name, not because of what I owned, but because I showed up. That evening, I grilled dinner for myself and waved to the kids riding bikes up the hill. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Music floated in from someone's open window, and I realized something. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the part where the main character stops reacting and starts choosing, where he doesn't wait for apologies or redemption arcs. He just lives on his own terms. No more rooms repurposed behind his back. No more manipulation disguised as family. Just air, light, time, and silence. The kind that means something. 6 months passed. Not quickly, not slowly, just steadily, like the way water smooths stone over time. The days in the cabin fell into a rhythm that soothed something in me I hadn't realized was bruised. I woke with the sun, brewed my coffee in silence, and sometimes walked the trail around the lake before breakfast. There was no tension in my chest anymore. No need to brace myself for an email, a knock, or a sudden betrayal wearing a familiar face. For the first time in years, I didn't feel watched. I felt free. The leaves had turned by then, brilliant reds, oranges, and yellows fanned across the trees like nature had decided to paint without rules. Tourists came and went, snapping photos of the foliage, but I didn't mind. I even started to look forward to the wave of hikers that passed by the local diner, sharing stories of trails and sore knees. I'd become something of a fixture at the library. Chess night on Tuesdays, a slow-growing book club on Thursdays. June, the neighbor who first welcomed me with a pie, had become a quiet friend. We shared meals sometimes, but never spoke too much about our pasts. There was a mutual understanding. Two people who'd both chosen peace after letting go of something that once defined them. One particular morning, I walked to the mailbox like I did every week. Most days it was just flyers, a bill or two, maybe the town newsletter folded into a tight square. But that day, there was a handwritten envelope tucked between an ad for snow tires and a church bulletin. The return address made me pause. Amara Marks, my niece, Julian's cousin, the daughter of my younger brother, who moved to Colorado years ago. We hadn't spoken in a long time, not because of any falling out, just distance. Life. The usual excuses families make. I sat on the porch swing and opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a simple letter. No drama. No manipulation. Just this. Dear Uncle George, I saw what happened. I didn't reach out earlier because I didn't know if I had the right to, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. I saw Talia's posts, the videos, the comments. At first, I believed them. Everyone did. But then I heard about the sale, the trust. I heard from people who knew you, people who knew them, and suddenly things made sense. I just wanted to say, you did the right thing. You reminded us that it's okay to protect ourselves even from family. I hope you're happy. I hope you know not everyone believed their version of the story. I hope you know you're remembered, with respect. Amara. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. Then I folded it back up and slid it into my pocket. Later that day, I pinned it to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a duck, a little gift from June after a day at the town flea market. It looked ridiculous on the steel surface, but I didn't care. It stayed up for weeks. That night, I found myself doing something I hadn't done since the move. I opened my old hard drive. Not out of nostalgia, but to reclaim. I went through old photos, Ava laughing beside a pumpkin she carved poorly, Julian as a toddler dressed as a dinosaur, vacations we never quit. I deleted the file. That felt better than I expected. I replaced it with a new folder, not labeled final, or important, or even estate. Just one word, legacy. Inside it, I added scanned copies of the nonprofit trust for the Ava L. Marks Memorial Fund. I uploaded the letter from Amara, and, as a final touch, I created a document with a single sentence. You can rewrite your story whenever you choose. Just don't let others hold the pen. That became my creed. Weeks later, I got a call from Leah. She said the nonprofit had officially been recognized. Donations had already started to trickle in. mostly from elderly clients she'd referred. One woman, 79, left a voicemail in tears saying she finally had help getting her grandson off her bank account. Another man, 68, said the fund covered legal fees when his son tried to sell his house out from under him. That hit me hard, because it meant my pain had turned into protection for people I'd never even meet. Funny, I told Leah. They tried to erase me from the future, but now I've carved my name into something permanent. She said she'd never heard me sound prouder. Maybe I was. Not in a loud, billboard kind of way, but in that quiet, sturdy way like when you build something that will outlive you. Winter came earlier than usual that year. Snow fell in slow, patient sheets, covering the lake in a silvery sheen. I learned to chop wood. I taught a kid named Max how to castle and chess. I even baked my first pie with questionable results, but a proud photo nonetheless. The cabin felt fuller. Not with people, with meaning. Then one evening, as I sat by the fireplace with a book in my lap, I realized something I never thought I'd feel again. I wasn't waiting for an apology. Not from Julian. Not from Talia. Not from anyone. They told their story, and I had published mine. But mine had footnotes. Evidence. Peace. Real silence. Not the kind that follows betrayal, but the kind that wraps around you like a blanket and says, you survived. You're safe. One day, years from now, someone might read about what happened. Maybe through the fund's website. Maybe through whispers in this small town. They might ask, why didn't he forgive them? And I hope someone answers simply, because sometimes healing isn't about forgiveness. It's about choosing peace over proximity. That's what the cabin gave me. Not revenge. Not retribution. Just a second chance to be whole. On my terms. In my own home. With no one at the door but the wind.